Okay, welcome. We're so excited that you are joining us today. We are at the summit on freedom, of the 11 days of global unity, of our 11 campaigns for change. Sorry, I have to get my video straight here. So welcome, and we are excited to have with us Rabbi Michael Lerner, Peter Gable, and Yvette Dubell. My name is Rick Ulfik, and I'm the founder of We the World and the We campaign at we.net. And I'm the co-creator of 11 Days of Global Unity with my dear friend, Troy Lush. We brought global partners together back in 2004. So this is our 17th anniversary of doing 11 Days of Global Unity. And I want to thank Jim Garrison and Rick Buckley, along with Ubiquity University and Humanity Rising, for broadcasting all of these 11 Days of Global Unity Summit panels. And you can find out about what's happening with 11 Days, the broadcasts that have happened up to this point and the events coming up. You know, it goes from September 11th through September 21st, the International Day of Peace. And you can find out about that by going to we.net. And we invite you to collaborate with us as a volunteer or an organization partner as well. These 11 campaigns go all year round. So again, if you want to collaborate, just go to we.net. So I'd like to introduce you to Yvette Dubell. She is our coordinator for We the World's Campaign for Freedom. She's an engaging speaker and presenter, published author, and artist, researcher, and strategy consultant with decades committed to leading social innovative initiatives. And she has a podcast series, Freedom Matters, which is part of the podcast It Matters at anchor.fm/it.matters. Welcome to the broadcast, Yvette. And we will, hi. And we will come back to you a little later in this broadcast. But I just want people to know that you are helping to coordinate this campaign for the 11 Days of Global Unity and for We the World in general all year round. Thank you, Yvette. So just to give the kind of overview of what's going on and why I am concerned about the state of freedom and democracy in the United States. I'm disturbed about trends that I see happening that seem to be leading towards minority rule in the United States. Gerrymandering is happening in many parts of the United States, where the politicians are picking the voters instead of the voters picking the politicians. There's voter suppression happening. There are problems with the Electoral College, where many states that have very small populations have as much weight electorally as the states that have large populations. We have unlimited money in politics, which distorts pretty much everything that's happening in politics. We have a Senate where 41 senators that represent only 21% of the country can block legislation because of the filibuster. that large majorities of people want and need for their families and communities. And I can go on and on. There's voter suppression laws that are being um, uh, uh, enacted in states around the country. Anyway, so I feel like we are definitely facing a crisis of freedom and democracy in this country, where some people feel that we are only two national elections away from this country losing whatever freedom and democracy we have left. So to I want to bring in folks, starting with Rabbi Michael Lerner, who have been working in this space for decades, and hear from them, and we'll have kind of a roundtable discussion. But I'd like to start with Rabbi Michael Lerner, who has been an activist for most of his life. He is the editor of Tikkun magazine and the founder of the Network of Spiritual Progressives. And I just want to say thank you, Michael, because I met you in 1995 and began volunteering with your group at that time called the Foundation for Ethics and Meaning. And it changed my life. It led me to leave my full-time career composing and producing and performing music for TV and film and commercials and all of that. And that inspired me eventually to found and launch We the World. And that brings us here today. So thank you, Michael Lerner, for changing my life. And while you're at it, changing the lives of millions of other people through Tikkun magazine and NSP and all the other things. You helped to change the life of Bill Clinton, because as I recall, Bill Clinton was reading Tikkun magazine and adopted some of those ideas from about the politics of meaning when he ran for office in 1992. Now, he may have left some of those ideas.
Yes, quite a bit, yes.
But he definitely started there. And you and Peter Gable, the two folks who created this idea of the politics of meaning, started off. So Michael, tell us what you think about what's happening with freedom and democracy, and react to anything I said, whatever you would like, for a few minutes, and we'll bring in Peter and Yvette and we'll have a roundtable.
Yes, great. Well, first of all, I want to say that I think my contribution to the world is much more around helping and supporting you than Bill Clinton, whom I have no pride in for the way that he ended up being a just the same as the people that right now are undermining democracy. And the undermining of democracy is itself a questionable formulation, because this country has never been a democracy for African Americans, for Native Americans, and for many other peoples of color, not to mention a large section of poor people in this country. So I don't want to imagine that it was all great before and now we're losing it. It's been problematic for a very long time, and but yes, and it can get worse. And in fact, as Trump showed, it can get very worse. But as you point out, there's now a systematic attempt to deny people the rights that they thought, or that we thought we had won in the past. That reality, certainly engineered by the Republican Party, but really to serving. I mean, the Republican Party is the spokesperson and really the agent of the American ruling class, its elite, the 1% of the population that owns 80% of the wealth of the country. So why are we particularly worried at this moment? Because they succeeded in stacking the Supreme Court in such a way that any legislation that's passed that in some way threatens the power and the wealth of the ruling elite will be declared unconstitutional, and has already. The Voting Rights Act, that was the product of so many years of struggle by the civil rights movement, and that was the crowning victory of the civil rights movement, supposedly. But by the mistake of relying on the electoral outcomes without continuing to push for the fundamental underlying ideas, our movements declined considerably. So I and Tikkun magazine, it's Tikkun. If you want to look at it online, it's tikkun.org. And the network of spiritual progressives, spiritualprogressives.org. We are very concerned with dealing with that reality, because it doesn't matter how many things get passed by the Congress if they get declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. And there's no way to change that. These people they're young people. They have a firm grasp on power, and there's no way to change that except by creating the kinds of legislative transformations that are absolutely necessary. Now, for me, the two priorities around that are fighting racism on the one hand, and on the other hand, dealing with the climate crisis and the seeming move towards destroying the life support system of the planet. It seems incredible, but that's actually what's happening. The people with the power today do not care about the future. They're looking only at their bottom line and seeing how much money they can make, regardless of how destructive what they're producing is to the life support system of the planet. That's why we need a series of constitutional amendments, because it's only that way. But we're never going to win a constitutional amendment until we change the consciousness of a large section of people. And that's the failure of the liberal and progressive movements, in my view, that whereas the right has for the last 40, 50 years built up all kinds of institutions, colleges, universities, et cetera, that put forward their worldview, the left has been, the liberal, by the left, I mean everybody in the liberal and progressive world, that the left has too much focused on a narrow set of issues, important issues, but they concern primarily the physical well-being of people, but not speaking to another set of needs that the right has been able to champion. And those are what I call the meaning needs, the hunger that people have for meaning and purpose, the hunger that they have for love and kindness, the hunger that they have for recognition of themselves as being fundamentally valuable. And in fact, from my experience in the liberal and progressive world, that has been almost totally ignored, except insofar as it talks about some material needs, adequate health care, adequate pay, a lot of things that they're right about. And I'm very much aligned with the liberal and progressive world. But I have to say that we are not going to get the kind of 2/3 of majority that we need to pass the kinds of constitutional amendments that are needed to surpass the Supreme Court, unless we speak to what I call the meaning needs, or the need for recognition and for affirmation. So we've put forward a different vision in my book, Revolutionary Love, that came out in 2019 and published by the University of California Press. And I urge people here to read it, to get hold of it. You can get it from us if you want at tikkun.org/LJ. L stands for love and J stands for justice. so it's about love and justice. But what we are saying is we need to formulate politics in a different way, and that's why we say that a progressive movement should use the following kind of discourse: that we are a movement for love and caring, the caring society, caring for each other and caring for the earth. Okay, pretty quick. You can get that in a 5-second soundbite. Okay, caring for each other and caring for the earth. But what that means for me, and you can read this on our website, is a new bottom line. Today, every institution is judged efficient, rational, and productive to the extent that they maximize money and power. We need a new bottom line in this society. That's the old bottom line. We need a new bottom line. A new bottom line that says every institution, every corporation, every government policy, every political system, the cultural system, the healthcare system, all of them need to be judged efficient, rational, and productive to the extent that they maximize love and caring, kindness and generosity, ethical and environmental sensitivity and responsibility, seeing other human beings as embodiments of the holy, not simply looking at other human beings in terms of what can they do for you, but rather seeing them as valuable in and of themselves, and looking at the earth not solely from the standpoint of what can you get from it, how can you turn this beautiful planet into a commodity that can be sold, but rather responding to the universe and the earth in particular with awe and wonder and radical amazement at the grandeur of all that is. That's what a liberal and progressive world needs to be speaking in order to speak to the hearts of the significant section of the population that is not yet on our side, but would benefit greatly on the material plane if they could trust a left that seemed to be caring about them. But the truth is that the left actually projects a vision of them that says, oh, well, anybody who's not with us must be not with us because they're a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, a xenophobe, and anti-Semite, whatever. Okay, now, yes, those things exist in the right, but that's not why people are there. They're there for a deeper set of needs that the right speaks to and that the left has failed to speak to, particularly the right-wing churches I have in mind. So we need a different kind of discourse, a discourse that affirms people, and that helps people imagine a different kind of society. And that's the last thing that I believe we need. I've said a few of the things. The next thing that we really need, we need to project a vision of the world we actually want, because that vision, I think, would speak to lots of people. I wrote it in part in my book, Revolutionary Love, and that's why I'm urging people to read it. But I think that new vision is a critical part of what people have to hear from us. Not just, hey, look, we got money to build some more roads and more bridges and whatever. That's important too. I'm not denying. I'm very glad that Biden has gotten something going on that scale. But we need a much deeper level of a discourse that speaks to the heart and speaks to the hunger that people have for recognition, for caring, for love, for generosity, and for a world that affirms the spiritual aspirations that lead so many people into right-wing churches. So Peter Gable, my comrade for such a long time, and a wonderful thinker, and I'm passing it on to you.
Okay.
Yes.
Very good.
And let me just say that Peter, I've known also Peter for quite some time. We've worked together quite a bit, and Peter is an acclaimed author and activist for such a long time. And before we go to Peter, I do want to comment, Michael, that I think that what you have done, and we're going to hear from Peter in a moment, what the two of you have done with Tikkun and the family of people and organizations, network of spiritual progressive is foundational, I think, And one reason why I jumped to my feet when I first met you, Michael, on that fateful day when you did an event with Gloria Steinem, I think it was early in 1995. And because I thought that the whole idea of spiritual politics was so important because it was being copyrighted, like you said, on the right, but it was such an important thing. So I feel like you and Peter and others, Marianne Williamson as well, but this idea of spiritual politics is really foundational to moving forward, to changing, to making that cultural shift. And we do it in a very simple way. We talk about we, going from a me-based society to a we-based society. So it's expanding those circles of caring and concern beyond yourself, beyond your communities, beyond your ethnic groups, beyond your religious groups, nationalities, beyond your species, to include other species and plants and animals, and even the ecosystems that support all life. That is our expanded concept of the word we. And if we make that cultural shift, then it'll become normal for the well-being of each and every member of society to be considered essential to the survival and well-being of the entire whole of our world. So so I just wanted to say that's, first of all, the two of you have been pioneers in terms of spiritual politics, and then how that has translated into what we're doing with We the World. So
Great.
Peter.
Thank you for what you're doing with We the World, and
Thank you.
I'm delighted.
So that's beautiful, both of you, what both of you said. I would foreground the fact that the world that you both are describing, that I wholeheartedly embrace, can be described as moving from me to we, or that the longing in all of our hearts is to live in a world in which we are fully recognized in our humanity, in which we affirm and love one another, and in which that mutual recognition, which is the title of my new book, The Desire for Mutual Recognition, Social Movements and the Dissolution of the False Self, which is the core idea of the book, that we are individuals, but that we are social individuals, and we cannot realize ourselves unless we can realize ourselves through our connectedness to others, through the affirmation we receive from others. When we experience that, we fill out as beings. We emerge into our full capacity. That's why the subtitle refers to the power of social movements, is that in the rising force of social movements progressive social movements, is embodied this mutuality of becoming present to each other, of realizing our capacity for love and joy and mutual sight of one another's true being. The problem is that we exist inside an envelope that is still the 18th century liberal envelope, which affects tremendously the common sense of the existing world. For example, you guys were talking about the declaration of various legislations as unconstitutional. Well, the Supreme Court can easily do that and rationalize it because the document that they're using has nothing in it about creating a loving community, has nothing in it about the aspiration to a world based on we rather than me. It does say we the people, but that's it. Everything else has to do with individual rights, the pursuit, basically the basic structure of American law, and you didn't mention, but I've been a law professor for 30 or 40 years. The basic structure of it is, and we exist inside the envelope of these set of assumptions, is that everyone is separated or as I often say, the picture of the world in the Constitution and in American law is that we are a society of disconnected monads, all floating around in our separate identities, pursuing our separate lives. And as a result, our movements, when they enter the legal arena, have difficulty giving voice to what they're really about, because they have to be retranslated into a language of, we want more rights, and that often has to be defined in terms of individual rights, but not, we want more healing of our separateness so that we can experience the law, fully experience the realization of the longing in our hearts. That's not part of the discourse of law yet, although a number of us are trying to build a movement in which the whole legal structure shifts toward integrating spirituality, law, and politics. That's the name of actually the organization. It's the Project for Integrating Spirituality, Law, and Politics, where we have developed a series of ways of approaching law that brings into being the spiritual dimension of healing conflict, and brings into being the link between social justice and true human recognition of the other as worthy, as equal to you, as the same as you. Social justice, not just in terms of getting your rights, but rather social justice in terms of healing the separateness that has created the problem in the first place. So people feel the crisis that you started describing, Rick, actually emerges in part, significant part, from the fact that people do not feel recognized. That's why Michael's advocacy of the politics of meaning, the way he described it, is so important. People do not feel seen in the way that I'm saying. They do not feel they are part of a world in which anyone cares about them, and in which they are themselves included in a world. So out of that sense of, I would call it the denial of their basic desire for love and mutual recognition, out of the denial of that, people withdraw into themselves and become attached to fantasies of community that preoccupy them and become obsessional to them. And these are paranoid, often based on the other as a threat rather than the other as the source of our completion. And we have this, of course, in the Trump world with the Trump era with Make America Great Again. That is an imaginary solution to people's inner feeling of not being seen, of not being part of something larger than themselves, of not being part of a true community. So as a result, the manipulation to try and get control of power through the vocabulary of democracy, in gerrymandering or in the other ways that you described, Rick, actually makes sense if you see people are manifesting a distortion of belonging to a community and fighting off imagined threats of some other who's attacking that community, that actually is a distortion based on the lack of actually being seen in terms of their deepest spiritual longings and needs. That's why we have to build into our movement that discourse as that Michael described, a discourse that speaks to that and that manifests that in our own groups and in our own movements, that spirit of caring, loving energy, and well, the link between community and true democracy. I'll stop there.
Yeah, and one question I have is for you, Peter. You talked about the desire for mutual recognition, which is your book. The other part of that is social movements and the dissolution of the false self. Do you want to talk about what do you mean by the false self?
When we grow up in a world in which we aren't fully seen for who we are, we develop an artificial, adaptive self through which we navigate school, work, family life, the whole thing. the whole experience is, I describe it as the false self, because one way of capturing it is the way people talk on television, the mannered and false way that people do not subtly manifest the presence that they actually are, because they are conditioned in the way that we're conditioned in our gender, and they're complexly conditioned in a way that cuts them off from their longings of the deepest longings of their being. And so it's movements of energy upward where we come to see one another fully that can dissolve our dependency on those forms of identity that actually reflect our separation.
I see. Thank you. So let's bring in Yvette. Yvette Dubel, as I mentioned, is coordinating our campaign for freedom. And Yvette is involved with many aspects of the arts as they connect to freedom, and in terms of how the arts can be used to maybe help in that way that you were just talking about, and dissolve that false self that we are brought up, to have in this society. What do you think, Yvette?
Well, as Peter was making that point, I was reminded of filters, the crisis of Instagram filters. Well, I guess that's the most known realm of where filters are used, but there's a whole array of them now for Zoom meetings. For example, it can. Do you guys know what I'm talking about before I just skip over?
No, but we can pick it up from listening to you. But.
Yeah, go for it. Tell us.
I don't know if I needed
filters.
to explain it. Okay, I wasn't going to. Okay, so I'll explain. So what the filters allow you to do is completely change your appearance. So like for Zoom meetings, they've come up with filters that will make a woman. I do actually have on some lipstick, but it would make me look like I had on makeup. And so depending on how elaborate you would want that to be. But even more than that is it allows you to change your face. So like, I think that my eyes are like, I would love to have bigger eyes, like bigger, deep set eyes. So there are filters that can let you change your eyes, your cheekbones, the shape of your face, your body. So on Instagram, you have people, my brother actually just told me a story this weekend. He had a date with somebody and she looked nothing like her Instagram pictures because she's been using filters to change her body. So you can make your face look thinner, you can make your eyes bigger, you can make your lips bigger, you can make your waist smaller, your breasts bigger. And so when people meet you, you have people who are Instagram models. And so one of the things that means is when you meet them in real life, you will not know that they are a model because it's a fabrication. Now, the scary part of this is it's driving suicides of young people. It's driving underage plastic surgery. And when I say underage, under 18, plastic surgery, because people, and I'm going to say mostly, I'm guessing women are the ones, and I say that because there are a lot of filters for makeup, for all different kinds of makeup for different occasions. People have an unrealistic standard that they're presenting of themselves online that they can't live up to. And so if you're a really young person, I can't imagine how I would have responded to that technology. I mean, I had an eating disorder and all sorts of, I wanted a nose job. I was obsessed. That's what I wanted when I graduated high school. I wanted my mom to fix my nose. I had a bump in my nose that I obsessed about oh my gosh, until I was like 18. I cannot find this bump in my nose that I was so obsessed about. But these young people, and I hate to say like these young people, but I'm not a young person anymore. Anyway, and it's not just young people. There are women like my age. I know women who plastic surgery has become a kind of coping mechanism. It's a way to grieve. It's a way, you can't fix the relationship, but I can change this thing on my face. Or I can change this thing on my body. And so I feel like the filters, and I'm going to call it a crisis of filters, has just really fed into this and made it worse. Because I remember when I was in my late 20s, about to turn 30, seeing my friends who were just turning 50 getting facelifts. And once somebody starts getting a facelift that young, because I'm 50, I'll be 51 this year, what happens is you then start to obsess about every little line in your face. And when you can use a filter to make your face look really smooth, but then when you go to the mirror or you're not in front of the camera, that's not what you look like. And so that's creating a really, it's a nuts level of false self. You know, like traditional spiritual work was about dealing with the ego and peeling back those layers. But this is like something next level that very much seems generational to me, because you have a generation of young girls who in their what they call the tween years now, before you're actually a teenager, that this becomes how they want to present to the world, and they don't like presenting their real self. And we're not even talking about the deeper real self, Peter. Okay, I'm just talking your superficial, what you look like. That is creating a crisis for people. There are some people that don't want to go back into the work, like go back into the office, because they like the way they present on Zoom so much better. Okay. So people are looking for remote positions. You know what I'm saying? So this is like something much deeper than just the kind of ego work that I feel like Peter is speaking to. This is something much deeper, because people want to be that image that they put on their social media. And when your social life, like now when people meet people, it's not let's talk and get to know each other. What's your Instagram handle? And I look up your Instagram to understand who you are. And we don't need to talk. I can look at your Instagram and tell who you are. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think that this is like a whole nother level for this generation that we're coming up with, or not we're coming up, that's coming up. And so when you talk about this kind of deeper political action, we did for the week of global unity, the Freedom Campaign led an embodied performance with the idea of introducing this idea of Otto Schwammer's concept with Theory U, the outcome, your outcomes are directly related to the place within where you're coming, because just in the casual conversations I had about there needing to be a different way of approaching political action and not just reaction. But when you're talking to somebody that's emotionally, psychically, and maybe spiritually immature, there's a whole lot of like baby step work that you have to get to just to be aware of what your actual emotions are. Do you know what I'm saying? Because there's not even that level of what we're all talking about. We're considering that we're talking about these basic things. But when somebody doesn't have basic skills to manage their emotions, okay? And we see this with, have you gone somewhere and it's like everybody on their phone? They don't know how to interact and have a conversation. And I was really struck when I first noticed like a lot of young graduates. I homeschooled my kids. And so when my kids were, I don't know, 15 or 16. And I was seeing college graduates who couldn't really have a conversation with an adult in a social situation. That's problematic, because that speaks to what you're talking about, Peter, about being able to show up, and what you were talking about too, Rabbi Michael, being able to show up as your authentic self when you've had no development of an authentic self. Your self is completely developed to be a representation on social media, and then you try to make yourself match that. That's what's happening. And so the work that we're talking about and the level of awareness that they need to respond to this democratic crisis, it's just not there. They need basic skills to even comprehend what you're talking about. So I feel like the challenge is, how do we engage? Okay, so with the film festival, for example, we started the We Freedom Film Festival to address what you were talking about, inspiring people to imagine a world that is better than our past, and cultivating a generation of filmmakers that would speak to that. Because I had noticed this dystopian trend that has only gotten worse. But the problem is that filmmakers, and okay, so we could talk about doing a documentary, but most young people aren't going to watch that. You're not going to reach many people. So it has to come into our sci-fi and our more fictional fantasy stuff, but nobody's thinking that. The people making films are driven by what the people who distribute and buy films will pay for. So there's a whole nother underlying issue of tapping into a different set of motivations. We're not doing this work because we're getting rich at it. At some point, all of us made some decision about like this being more important than money, right? How do you convince young people to make that kind of decision in a world where, as long as they've been alive, there is no security? There is, there's no community safety net. There's, every man for himself or every woman for herself, kind of. Like they're growing up in this world, and they like. When you think of like the social organizations that we had, when we were young, and I was talking about this to a group a couple of weeks ago. When I was young, our congressman passed away, but before he passed away, when he was in the state General Assembly, they would come through these organizations. Those organizations would arrange for them to come and talk to student groups in classrooms. They would, They would come and they would tell you about what they were doing. And there was a level of accountability that the community expected. That expectation isn't there anymore. People have grown up with this world where they're constantly sold to. Everybody is bought and paid for, and nobody expects any better. And so cynicism is the key to survival, I think, for this new generation. Expect nothing and you won't be disappointed. And I used to believe that. I remember that being my philosophy when I was like 16 or 17. And that was my inner battle, was expect nothing from the world or commit to changing it.
Right. So
yeah.
how do
that
we,
was a really long spiel.
No problem. That's great. And so
We've
Michael,
got
that's
to
a good
reach-
question.
I think that we need to connect with some of those people that they would listen to. I mean, they're only going to listen, the limited amount to me because I'm like their mom.
So how do we deal with that, Michael?
I think that the film festival is. I wanted to find out
Okay.
if they thought that the media, if they see an end with the media also, with the messaging that they're talking about.
Sure. But this whole issue of reaching young people and actually beginning to make that shift that you were talking about, Rabbi Michael Lerner, for people to get to have that shift so that their meaning needs are being addressed and they feel that the institutions are interested in their meaning needs. How do we get there?
Well, I mean, I think what we just heard was pointing to one sphere that is very important. But who is the we? The we has to be people who have an alternative worldview and who can raise immediately the question of what is it that why are you wanting to sell yourself so badly? Well, in this society where the old bottom line is maximizing money and power, there's a hierarchy, and people rightly understand that if they want to succeed, whatever, whether it be in the level of economic reality or even in the level of dating and having, you have to appeal to the values that come down from the top in this society. We have to challenge that. We have to challenge a different those values, and that's why one of the things that I think should be on the flag of the liberal and progressive world is don't blame yourself. This society runs on the notion that everyone is, as Peter pointed out, a lone individual, and nobody is there for you. And as a result, people end up buying the underlying self-justification of the capitalist marketplace, namely that this is a society in which you can make it if you really try. And so if you're smart enough and you work hard enough, you can succeed. But of course, it's a big lie. It's not true at all. All the information tells us that there's been very little in the way of upward mobility over the course of the past 70 years. But we have to say, don't buy the notion that this is a meritocracy. It's not a meritocracy. We don't blame yourself, because that's what is being taught to people. Whatever happens to you, it's your own fault. You didn't do X, Y, or Z. Now, one of those X, Y, or Z's is to study hard enough or be aggressive enough. And another one is look the right way. You know, all of these things that that are connected. And I think it's important for us to project a vision of all the ways in which these things are connected to the fundamental underlying ethos of this society of looking out for number one, caring for oneself, because that's all there is, because nobody's going to care for you. And yes, then people are very scared, and kids are learning that in the way you've described. And they and for a section of them, it has to do with what they look like, and other people try other techniques. Or in more wealthy families, they buy their way into college with enough money. The craziness is everywhere in this society because of its bottom line of maximizing money and power and looking out for number one. We have to provide a different worldview, and that has to be taught. We have to try to find ways to get into the media, into those who are making movies, those who are shaping the various forms of social media, and in every place challenging the old bottom line, challenging and affirming the humanity and goodness of people, regardless of what they look like and regardless of how much money they have, that people are fundamentally valuable and deserve to be cared for and loved for who they are, and not for how much they fulfill the empty pictures of what a success is that this society gives. Because the truth of the matter is that when people get to the top economically, they still aren't satisfied. And so they feel like they need more. We at the Institute for Labor and Mental Health, which was the institution that led to the creation of Tikkun magazine, we interviewed people who were college professors, and they were saying, well, I should have been the president of this college. We interviewed people who were presidents of the colleges, and they said, I should have been if I had done better in something or other, I could have been on the Secretary of Education for the United States. I mean, there's so many people filled with self-blaming for not being enough. And so our message is, you are enough, there is enough, and if we share, we can take care of each other and you will be fine. But if we keep on going with the look out for number one, maximize your own well-being without regard to the consequences for others, we get the destruction of the planet, which is happening at a very rapid rate right now.
Exactly. So what about you, Peter? Any reactions to what Michael was saying and Yvette earlier?
Yes. Well, I missed some. You may have seen that I fell off the screen because my internet connection was disabled for a few minutes. Well, I just think that I'm more optimistic in a way than Yvette. With that was a beautiful description of Instagram's experiential reality of Instagram. But the people, the experience of the young person who is filtering their image to present an outer self to the world that they think would have value is actually, it's hollow, it's empty. It can't satisfy them, and it doesn't make them happy to pursue this, although it can be an obsessional activity that can ruin their lives. You mentioned the suicide that may be caused by this kind of practice. So I think that in a way, what Michael's saying is that we have to manifest in our movements an ideal in terms of the language we use, or a vision for what it is we want, and then also a reality in how we treat one another in our movements, how we manifest ourselves publicly, that shows people that they could exist in a world in which their holiness is seen, in which the longing within them is affirmed, instead of their Instagram constructed empty outer self, which is the current preoccupation that can be. In other words, I don't think it's because of people's unhappiness buried inside those efforts that we always will have an opportunity to reach people in who they really are, in their souls. That's why I'm not optimistic, as I just, doesn't matter how widespread the practice is, it's inherently hollow and inherently does not provide people with satisfaction or well-being, any more than rising to the top of the hierarchy. In my upbringing, I knew quite a few people like that who became presidents of companies, and they became alcoholics. They built huge houses with huge fence around it that others could admire from a distance. They'd be sitting with their bottle in the center of the whole thing, trying to deal with the pain that they felt. That is the reality that people are experiencing. That solitude, that withdrawnness, that lack of being able to fully manifest themselves in the spirit of who they really are, that is, and the longing for human connection in the community that we ought to be creating. That's what we have going for us.
So
it's true. It's overwhelming. It's when you look at the massive degree of distraction from that and avoidance of that, it is overwhelming. Whether it's television, cynicism, Instagram, everything. But we always have to remember there's nothing to it but an outer construct of false recognition, not the real thing.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to jump in, Peter, okay?
Yeah.
So yeah, because I want to say, because people might be asking, well, how do we do this, or what do we do? I want to give an example from my own experience in the religious world. When I went to before I became a rabbi, I would go around to different synagogues, and in the Reform movement, the conservative movement, the Jewish renewal movement, you often heard wonderful talks, sermons that were really moving. But after the service was over, you left. Nobody came up to you. You never talked to anybody. When I went to the Orthodox world, I heard sermons that were really yucky, full of either racism or Jews are better than everybody or whatever, or Israel is the greatest place in the world without any regard to the Palestinian people. But after the service, people would come up to me and say, hey, let me introduce myself. Would you like to do you have a place for lunch today? Would you like to come to my house? I can invite you for a Sabbath, Shabbat lunch. Or is there anybody sick in your family that we could go visit? We do that. Or if you're single, would you like to meet somebody that we could introduce you to? These little things make a huge difference for people. That's caring. Now, how do you translate that into political movements? Well, at very least, like this, that at every meeting and definitely at every demonstration, there should be a time in which having articulated, if they would, that we need a caring society, caring for each other and caring for the earth. We want to take 10 minutes or 15 minutes for you to introduce yourself to a few people here that you don't know and see if you have anything in common, because we hope that not only will you be engaged in transforming the world, but they'll have new friends, because part of building a caring society is helping people connect with other people that have shared interests. And we'd like you to take some time to do that right now in our demonstration. And every political meeting should end or should have in the middle a 15-minute space to do that, to say, okay, introduce yourself to people here you don't know yet. Okay. And see if you have things in common. And we want to tell you that it's a political act to make friendships and act in a caring way towards other people, that is a part of it. Now, of course, there are these other progressive people who think, well, that's all of it. All we have to do is be nice, be kind, be generous. That's important too, but it's not all of it. We need to change the whole economic and political system and build a system based on the new bottom line that I've just articulated and that you can read again at tikkun.org, tikkun.org. But in the meantime, we have to live, as Peter said, you have to live these ideas. You have to manifest them in your own movements. Otherwise, they just sound like empty words. And people say, oh, well, everybody isn't like that. Everybody's out for themselves. But as Peter points out, it's not really true. It's not really true that but they believe that everybody else is about for themselves. And the more we repeat that line, the more people feel deeply cynical about the possibility of building a world of love and caring. So then when they hear those words, they say, it's not possible. That's just, you're just in a fantasy world thinking that you can build that world. So we have to both live that and simultaneously articulate it and explain to people that all the major changes they say it's so unrealistic. And we say all the main changes that have happened in this society, every advance in democracy has happened by virtue of people who were going for something that were for many, many decades told that's unrealistic. But thank God for all the unrealistic people, because that's why the civil rights movement won the victories that it did. That's why the women's movement overcame a lot, not all, but a lot of the sexism in this society. That's why the gay movement was able to eventually win the right to marry. And around the world, that's how the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa won, because a lot of people said what I'm saying to you, anybody who's listening here: don't be realistic. Go for your highest vision of the good. That's the most important thing. Hold on to your highest vision of the good. Articulate it to other people, and when they say it's impossible, tell them no. You never know what's possible until you struggle for what is desirable. You never know what is possible until you struggle for what is desirable. And so go for your highest vision of the good and be that to the greatest extent that you can, even though having compassion for yourself and others, because all of us have flaws and all of our flaws will show up and people will be able to say, see, you're not really the total embodiment of love. No, we're not, but we're on the path, and you could be on that path too.
Exactly.
Actually, Yvette, I don't want to. You go ahead. I do have one thing to say about that. I'd like to say. Should I do it now?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. I just very briefly. You may have. I was very disappointed during the Amazon unionizing campaign in Alabama when the spokespeople for the union, who, of course, I admire, and my partner's a union organizer, and was totally with them in that struggle, which was unsuccessful. The union was not described as a place in which you can connect with other people and participate politically in the life of the organization. And there's so much to say about how a union can contribute to a place like Amazon in building relationships between people and making people feel a part of something larger than just being an isolated worker, and taking responsibility for the whole enterprise and feeling connected to others in doing so, and building a sense of solidarity and fraternity in that process. I've witnessed this so many times, but it isn't yet something that union leaders feel safe saying. They instead say things that are based much more on protecting basic material interests, wages, working conditions, which is fine. I mean, of course, that's absolutely critical, those things. But when Amazon then says, oh, well, we've already done that. We just gave everybody a raise, and we have imported all these new health and safety recommendations into our factory and so forth, it undermines what the union really wants to argue for, which is a new kind of community in which people experience solidarity and relationship, fraternity, affection, community with each other. And that was not spoken for. So I'm saying I'm following up on what Michael said to say, yes, you can say this in public space and it will transform, it'll greatly increase the popularity of your movement because of how much people are longing for that.
Oh, man.
Yes. And I wanted to add something also about about what Michael was saying about how we treat each other during meetings and that kind of thing, because it's a regular practice now when we have our We Team meetings for people to ask, how are you doing? How's everything going? And in fact, some people in our meetings are having some either health issues themselves, or like our dear friend Angel, her husband has cancer and has some issues. So people are able to step up and help and take over certain things because other people are having an issue. And so I think we all understand this as being, it's part of this idea of we consciousness, right? But it is also important just in terms of our being effective as at doing the things that we want to do. Yvette, we haven't heard from you in a bit. Any comments about what you've been hearing up to this point?
Well, I was thinking about what you guys were saying about the community and those deeper needs. And this came up for me again at a training yesterday. And Rick knows this about me. I'm a bit of an introvert. I don't have a big need for social gatherings and things like that. But learning to respect, because I believe that's also part of the diversity inclusion piece, is learning how do we include people who have different needs. And like for somebody like me that I don't, I keep a pretty tight circle, let's just say. And I move in and out of others, but on a more, so for me, staying in touch may mean I talk to you once a year, but to somebody else, that might mean like every week. And so being clear about those kind of expectations and needs. And I think one of the issues is that people, oftentimes in leadership positions, don't have a lot of experience with diversity, inclusion, and how to like navigate that and make that work. And I see that I think part of the journey is know thyself and understanding how you will deal with those deficits if you're like leading a team or whatever. And the needs are different from the needs that you are prepared to meet. That's part of what we're learning, is it's not all yours to do, and you bring in other people, and everybody has different talents and not feeling. So I think that for people to understand, one, you don't have to do it all on your own. That's why we do these kinds of things, is to make people's work known. And so one of the things we're looking at, and I would love to invite you both to like join us for an episode, but doing these doing these sorts of conversations, specifically looking at gearing up for next year's film festival, because this year our mission was very out of sync with where the minds were this time around, in terms of wanting to encourage filmmakers to make those kinds of films. And we focus on short films that are 39 minutes or less, because I love short films. But what does it take to get people geared in that direction, to spark imaginations in that direction? So I was thinking about things like having writers' workshops for filmmakers and things like that, specifically geared around developing these sorts of ideas with artists. So that's something I would love to talk to you guys about at some point, but looking at how we can cultivate and encourage people's imaginings in that direction, because it is very hard for most people to think of a future that is unlike our past, largely because they don't know enough about other cultures. I think if you had more cultural frames of reference, you have a lot more kind of ingredients you can put in the pot, so to speak. So I think that that's an important piece, is for people to expand, like for, people for a long time, America's #1. Remember those big glove, those like plastic things. Used to those foam, they were foam, the foam finger, America's #1. I was like, do you really know enough about the rest of the world to say that? And most of the time people didn't. It's like, do you realize like other places, and I would just throw out, some bit of information like, like this country has paid parental leave. Did you know that? And so people still believe that, even though their experience doesn't back it up. And there's just a bit of cognitive dissonance, So I think that helping people to be able to take in some of these more, because people are very overwhelmed by complexity. The things that we've been talking about, I can just imagine, so many people like shutting down. But I think that there's a way to break these kinds of conversations up so that people can digest them. I think that's one of the solutions is at some point, maybe we'll have like somebody on our team who can do that. But I've been looking at doing clips of these kinds of conversations and sharing just a bit. So I just think that we need to look at like more ways to make this kind of information and this way of thinking easier for people to digest, easier for them to wrap their heads around, because, you guys, when we used to read, a sentence that was a paragraph, you know what I mean? And like now, if you do that, that's like, oh my God, nobody's going to know what you're talking about. And so, everybody's been raised on everything 30 seconds, give it to me in 30 seconds. If I can't take it in 30 seconds, it must not be important. And so figuring out how to navigate that, I guess like that pathway that we have to travel. So that's my thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Yvette. So as we kind of wrap up, I mean, we could talk for hours, I'm sure. But as we wrap up, I'd like to do like a little go around for what is your call to action? We've been talking about all the things that we feel are important. So what is our call to action? And let's start with just for like two minutes each in that range, 3 minutes at the most. What is your call to action going forward? And then give a way that people can reach out to you and connect to work with you. So starting with Rabbi Michael Lerner.
Okay. So my call for action is #1, go look at our website, tikkun.org, tikkun.org, and at our environmental and social responsibility amendment to the US Constitution. That's at tikkun.org/ESRA. That's step #1. #2, tell people, everybody you know, that that you're part of a movement that wants to build a much bigger progressive movement by talking about love, caring, kindness, and generosity, ethical and environmental sensitivity, and awe and wonder at the grandeur of the universe and the sanctity of every human being on the planet. And that is only 15 seconds worth of a soundbite, but it makes a big difference when you start talking in this language, in the language of caring, and the language of awe and wonder at the grandeur of the universe. It makes a huge difference. You can do that. You can begin that conversation yourself. Yes, you affirm everything else that they want and all the good things that the liberal and progressive movement stand for, but add on and tell them that they need to add on to what they're thinking about. A world that is filled with love, kindness, and generosity, and that's the way to build a successful movement, is to start to talk in affirming the spiritual dimension of reality, and that they also will be much more recognized if they and much more respected if they can move from just the laundry list of demands of the liberal progressive world to a larger value system, and affirm that for them. And when they say it's unrealistic, tell them, you know what? That's what has kept people down for such a long time, because the people who they're listening to are telling them what's realistic are the people who have a stake in the status quo, but you don't really have that stake. You can build a different kind of world, but to do that, you have to affirm the possibility of possibility.
Sounds good. Affirm the possibility of possibility. And Peter, what is your call to action?
Well, it's related to Michael's, and both of us are really talking about action is changing a way of thinking. And so my call to action would be to learn how to articulate progressive social policies in a way that brings out the aspect of them that reflects our desire to live in a spiritually more whole, more fulfilling world. For example, Social Security, if you're arguing for expanding Social Security, the way to say that, the way to speak about that, from my point of view, is that it is a wonderful manifestation of intergenerational love and care. That is the meaning of Social Security. Now, that's a different meaning than just, oh, well, the Democratic Party is for protecting old people. That's important, of course. But its meaning is a social meaning that connects the generations, generation after generation, in caring for each other. Or if you're arguing for universal health care, learn to argue for it as an opportunity, not as too burdensome a cost, but an opportunity to create a society in which we care for each other's health and the health of each other's families. Wouldn't it be thrilling? Wouldn't it be wonderful to live in such a world? So it's taking the social policies that are good already, even in our platforms, and finding in them a way of expressing them that embodies the creation of a loving and caring world. It would be very successful for the Democrats if they would do that.
I get it. Thank you, Peter. And if people want to connect with you.
Actually, I will say one last thing. So in my book, The Desire for Mutual Recognition, the whole last chapter is full of examples of this. Healthcare, Social Security, I mentioned those too, but affirmative action, racial justice, foreign policy. How do you think about these things in a new way that articulates the link between the world we want to bring into being and the particular policy that we're fighting for, that takes it out of the old liberal rights perspective, which is important in itself, but and creates this socially meaningful connecting perspective. Okay, Rick.
Good. And how do people connect with you if they want to?
There's two ways. One is to write me at ptrgable.com. That's my email. What did I say? ptrgable@gmail.com. PTR, that's Peter without the E's. ptrgable@gmail.com. Or go to my website, petergableauthor.com. And that has a lot of information there as well.
Okay, perfect. And Yvette,
what is your? Go to spiritlawpolitics.org.
I'm sorry, say that again.
No, if there are lawyers participating who are interested in, or law students who are interested in the transformation of law that we're trying to work on, in the same vein that I'm speaking here at the Project for Integrating Spirituality, Law, and Politics, go to spiritlawpolitics.org. Spiritlawpolitics.org.
Perfect. Okay, thank you, Peter. And Yvette, what is your call to action? And I want to read a question that came in. I don't know if you saw it. Sherry Stark says, how can I connect with Yvette about this filmmaking collaboration? I'm a filmmaker, and she goes on. So and what's your call to action, and how can people get involved with what you are doing and what we are doing?
Okay, I'd love to hook up with Peter's Spirit Law for the Art Research Project, because we're looking at social justice and reframing that through the arts, through embodied performance. I'd be very interested in checking that out. But for the person that was asking about the film festival, Film Freeway, We Freedom Film Fest. You can go there. Or if you connect with me on Instagram, Yvette Dubell, there's a
Do
post.
you want to
there.
spell that for people who are just
Oh, my name? Oh, it's in the ID thing. YVETTEDUBEL.
I don't know if that shows up on Facebook, but sure. Okay.
Oh, okay. All right. If they go to we.net, you can always connect there, go through. There's a pop-up form for volunteering, I think. I think it's a pop-up. And so select the Freedom Campaign, and that will get forwarded to me. So that might be the easiest to remember if you don't know how to spell my name. And anybody that is interested in collaborating or participating or exploring any of the things that I talked about, reach out. And my call to action would just be better and learn something.
Okay. That's great. And I'm bringing everybody in on Spotlight here. So I just want to say thank you to everyone. And I think we accomplished what we love to accomplish on all of our We the World broadcasts and events. We want to inspire, inform, and involve. 3 I's that make a we, so we can go from a me society to a we-based society. Thank you all so much. And it's great to see you both, Rabbi Michael and Peter.
Many blessings and great to see you.
That as well. Bye, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.